Fighting the Nazis was probably the right thing to do. Did it have costs? Yeah. Were the costs justified? Yeah, because the evil was so great. So it's complicated, and there's some truth in the don't interfere principle, but it's just taken to these crazy lengths. And it's also crazy to think that it follows from relativism. Or the same thing with anti-realism. Since there's no moral truth, it's a moral truth that you ought not to impose your values on others. This doesn't make any sense. If there are no moral truths, there's no moral truth. What else? More questions about realism, anti-realism, relativism, moral reasoning? Etc. Then let's move to Thompson. And I await your questions on that. I know we haven't finished that. We will next time. I can tell you where we're going to go, but not really asking. Questions about Thompson? Thompson and Singer? And Loeb? You want to know where I'm heading with that?
Yeah.
What I'm going to say is roughly this. The temptation is to say that, okay, your violinist example works in the case of abortion after rape, but it's different when somebody's pregnant because the pregnant woman got the fetus into this mess. Along with her partner, she took the risk. What Thompson says is not everything that brings about certain consequences has moral importance. For example, opening your door might result in your getting pregnant due to rape. But that doesn't mean that opening your door is inviting rape or anything like that. Taking on the moral burden of having the child should you be raped by opening your door. Why not? Because it's so unlikely to result in that outcome, and to insure against that outcome even further would be to make such an immense sacrifice that it just doesn't seem appropriate. Right? He said women could never walk down the street because, or if they do, they're taking their chances that they might have a baby and because they got raped and have to take care of it. I would say that's monstrous, because although it's too great a risk as long as there's one rape in the world, it's still too great a risk. Walking down the street doesn't usually result in pregnancy. Doesn't very often. It's a low probability. And to bring it down to zero would mean never leaving home. As Thompson says, without a reliable army. That's too much to ask of women. So we're looking at the burdens and the probabilities, and what Thompson does in her argument is she's saying essentially, I think, or implying that that's what goes on with birth control. You use birth control, it lowers the probability that you'll get pregnant, even though you had sex and played a causal role in creating the fetus's dependency. To lower it further would mean doing without sex, and that's too much to ask of people. For women. That's in section 4 of her paper. She doesn't talk about burdens. Probably is, but it's where I ask you to critically evaluate.
I mean, aren't you basically asking us to just go over
The main line of argument, you bet.
Thompson's article that it's like we don't have a moral obligation to like help anyone unless it's...
Well, about pregnancy too. I mean, I want you to get through the rape case and the birth control case. And so what I'm saying there about this, I'm not spelling it out for you the way I do in the other question, but I'm spelling it out for you in class that way. And so I want you to take it through the rape case and talk about the issues that came up there, and then take it through the birth control example and talk about the issues there. And for birth control, she makes two kinds of arguments. One we haven't finished yet is the burden probability argument. She's not explicit about that, but this is where I said I fill in the blanks for her, and I've actually talked to her about it, and she says that's what I'm getting at. Okay? If you want, it doesn't matter. I mean, if you say that it's in her article, it's going to look like you didn't read the article because it's just not there. But it's implicit in what she's saying. She's the one who came up with a reliable army, not me. Right? I'm just trying to read between the lines and figure out what it is that she's up to. I don't care about credit on the test. No. So she's got two kinds of arguments here. One is the series of examples, the burglar, the blunderer, and the people seeds. And I had a criticism of the people seed example that I thought was pretty deep. The other one is the burden and probability argument. There she's saying, look, when you open your window and you're taking a risk that music lovers will come in and hook you up to a violinist, but it's a really small risk, and to have to never be allowed to open your window even if it's really stuffy, that's a lot to ask of people. Likewise, if you have sex and use birth control, you're taking only a small chance that you'll get pregnant. And to ask people to lower the chance down to 0 would mean they'd never be able to have sex. That's too much to ask of people. Okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to chip away at both of those. I'm going to say that the chances of getting pregnant, even when using birth control, are much greater than the chance of getting pregnant owing to walking down the street. Suppose a method of birth control is 95% effective. That means 1 in 20 people who use it in a given year, on average, will get pregnant. That's a lot of pregnancies. And to lower the probability down to 0 might be very difficult, but you can lower it down to a very, very small number by using, say, 3 methods of birth control. Like being on the pill, but using condoms and some kind of contraceptive jelly or foam or whatever along with that. That lowers the probability to very tiny numbers. And it's not living without sex, it's living without your favorite kind of sex. Intercourse, right? There are other things you can do that are maybe not as satisfying, but it's not living without sex, it's living without fucking. And it's only living without that until you're ready to take care of the child, if it is a child. So then I'm going to give you an analogy, and it's something like this. Suppose I really care, a lot of people care about different things. Some people really, really like sex. Let's imagine that I really, really like shooting my rifle, okay? Instead of sex. And so I just love doing target practice. And I want to build a target range in my backyard so I can have target practice every day. It's so important to me. It satisfies something deep inside me in the way that sex does for a lot of people, you can imagine. I don't like shooting guns at all, but let's imagine this is true. Okay? I love to shoot. I'm going to go in my backyard and shoot. And I talk to people who build target ranges, and they say, we can build a target range in your backyard that is 99% effective at keeping stray bullets from lodging in your neighbor's children. There's only a 1% chance in any given year that one of your neighbor's kids will get shot. I say to myself, well, that's a very low probability, and what do you want me to do? Live without target practice? I like to shoot. So one day I'm out there shooting, and a bullet lodges in my neighbor's child's kidney, and the EMTs come and they say, quick, we're going to have to do an emergency kidney transplant. You're the only person anywhere near this child who's got the right type kidney. Get ready for the operation. And I say, hell no. Why should I let this child use my body to survive? I only took a small chance that I was going to put it at risk of dying without my help. What do you want me to do? Live without something I really care about? The answer is yes. Either you live without it or you take care of the child when the child needs your help, if it's really a child. A 1 in 100 chance or a 1 in 20 chance every year of killing a child. You might have sex for more than 20 years. Guess what? That's a very, very big chance that sooner or later you're going to be in a position where you want to kill that child, if it's a child. The idea that the importance of sexual activity, of sexual intercourse, is so great that it would justify taking risks like that children might need your body to survive, and then not allowing them to use that body, that seems obscene to me. If they're children. If they're not children, then fuck away. You kill them if you like, because they're not children. It looks to me like, when we get to this level, the question is, the conduct does amount to, is constructively giving it a right to use your body. If it comes into existence needing the use of your body. Because you're the, if I were the fetus's lawyer, I'd be saying, you got my client into this mess. Because you wanted to have intercourse instead of oral sex. Which I think is talking about it, right? Isn't that what that means? Sure. Oh, anyway. You got my client into this mess by having sex. And now you want to deny it, the very thing it needs to survive? It wouldn't need to survive at all if it weren't for your behavior. I would think that it would be monstrous not to let it use your body to survive. Because unlike the violinist, you're the one who got it into this mess, along with your partner. And I wish he could keep it too, if it's a person. Not a person, get all the sex you want. I don't recommend using abortion in place of birth control because it would be very expensive, etc. And I don't think there'd be anything wrong with using it if birth control failed, because there wouldn't be anything wrong with not using birth control from the fetus's standpoint. It doesn't have the standing to ask for use of your body because it's not a person. But it seems like the issue depends on whether it's a person or not. What's amazing about Thompson is that in a rape case, if you think that it's okay to disconnect the violinist, killing the violinist, then you ought to think it's okay to disconnect the fetus, even if it's a baby. Unless you think there's some important disanalogy that's being overlooked here. Well, that's kind of amazing for that case. The case where birth control fails, it's just not enough like the violinist example or the rape case to be treated the same way morally. It's a much, much greater risk. Walking down the street, you take a certain risk that you're going to get pregnant if you're female. And not being able to walk down the street would be a pretty restrictive kind of thing to impose on women. It's not the same thing as imposing on women and men the obligation not to have sex if fetuses, not to have intercourse, if fetuses are persons, especially given the probability that lots and lots of them will come into existence needing to use the woman's body to survive. If they're persons, anything like you can do that, morally speaking. So that's where I'm heading with it. I give another analogy just like the one I gave today. That isn't quite as sexual. And I already said why I think the people see version of the argument doesn't work. Because she's asked us to imagine that you're uprooting a plant. Of course our intuition says it's okay to do that. Ask about uprooting a 6-month-old child, you'll have a very different intuition most of you. Say, but fetuses aren't 6-month-old children, I'll say, well, you're arguing about whether or not fetuses have a right to life. That's just the issue here. Thompson can't get around it in the way that she thought she could. In the rape case, I think she actually pretty much does. For at least a lot of people. Anybody thinks it's okay to disconnect the violence. And for that, I think that's just an amazing contribution. Understand that I also think that the article is amazing in lots of other ways, because it helps to clarify these very issues. And because she sort of invented a method of thinking about moral questions that people didn't have any idea whether we could do that or not until she came along and started doing it. So I think that she gets a lot of credit for this article no matter what, even if I see flaws in it. Kevin?
I just don't get what you said. Explain why she thinks our obligations are limited in the 2 ways we discussed, and thus that our obligations to save others are limited.
Okay, the 2 ways we discussed are this. A right to life is not a right to the following. Anything you need to survive. It's not a right to that. And she uses the Henry Fonda example to try to show that, or we use the Brad Pitt example. The right to life also isn't the right not to be killed. Because sometimes the only way to get somebody to stop using your body without your permission is to disconnect them from it. And that kills them. But most of you thought that it would be okay to disconnect the violinist in the case in which you're stuck to the violinist for 9 months. And even Thompson says it would be indecent in certain cases not to disconnect the violinist. To disconnect the violinist in the 9-minute case. So not the 9-minute case. Because she is, her very, very extreme principle seems to be showing some signs of stress right there. Remember, Singer's on the other end of the spectrum. He thinks that if you can prevent something bad from happening without sacrificing something of equal moral worth, you ought to do that. And I find myself in between those two positions, thinking that there are some things that you ought to do to help others, but in a 9-minute case, you probably ought to let them use your body to survive. If that ever happens.
So where it says, explain the principle that I settled on it, is that to do it implied consent? Or